Welcome back to another episode of Millennial Gemz. I am your host, Akil Mack. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to want to tap into today's episode. Matter of fact, every episode, if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, you want to tap into. So, uh, today is definitely a must listen because we're going to talk about the top 10 or just top reasons entrepreneurs, business owners fail. They don't succeed. So, make sure you grab a notepad, make sure you grab a pen, whatever you need, your notes app, because this one's going to save you time, money, and stress. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to have this broken down into three sections. First section is going to be the core killers. All right. So this will be segment one. Second section, we're going to break it down into the people problems. And then the third section, we'll break it down into the money, marketing, and mindset. So before we get into it, put it out there. I am a certified QuickBooks Pro Advisor. So I help business owners, entrepreneurs organize their financial transactions. So if you are in need of a bookkeeper, hit the link in the description. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, hit it again in the description below or in the show notes if you're watching this on listening to this podcast. All right, segment one, the core killers. So one of the top reasons entrepreneurs don't succeed or have a hard time succeeding is because of a lack of market need for their business. Now, to my knowledge, again, and none of these, I an expert at. I'm going through the motions just as well. A lot of these I'll name on here. I'm going through some of them, not all of them, but some of them. But I just want to put it out there because I'm learning. Somebody else who's listening to this is learning or watching this is learning. So I just want to be a helping hand to everybody and just help you avoid the pitfalls if need be from my experience and what I've learned. So most startups fail because, nobody wants to buy what they're selling, right? So, you know, what I've learned early on is that you can't fall too much in love with the idea of what you're creating. You have to focus on the problem you're solving. On my board, on my vision board, I have a note card that says solve the customer's problem. I've had that on my board for the last 5 years because that is the main point of building a business. You get into business, obviously, yes, to make money, but you're doing it because there's a problem that people have and you want to solve that problem. You're a problem solver, right? So that's one of the main reasons why, you know, entrepreneurs, businesses won't succeed because they don't know what they're selling. You have no clue. So don't skip out on, you know, market validation. Make sure you're talking to your target audience and also, listen and, just do small launches to kind of just, you know, get some attention, kind of see how people are feeling about it. So that would be number one, lack of market need. Number two is running out of money. We all know at this day and age now, I mean, we all say credit is king, but cash flow is the supreme ruler as well. If not, I think the grandest supreme ruler, cash flow. A lot of businesses die because they're just not getting, the cash flow. So you could have, a great idea, but if your idea is just not, you know, generating enough money, then what good is it? So I would say the solution for not running out of money to this, from what I've learned, is, don't ball out too early. Definitely take small steps. Try to keep your overhead as low as possible. You know, any profit that you receive from your business, reinvest it. Don't spend any of your business profits on you yet. That all the money that comes through your business is not for you. That money is for your business. So don't rob your business of its growth and scalability. All profit, any money that comes through, you reinvest it so you can help build the business and make it better. And always know your numbers. Hence why you need to hire a bookkeeper like myself so that way we can keep your your business's numbers organized. So that'd be number 2, running out of money. Now the last of the core killers is just straight up lack of business knowledge. Here I am 5 years, trying to explore entrepreneurship, and there's still a whole lot of things that I just don't know, and I'm still continuing to learn. And you know what? I can openly admit that. I don't have a problem saying I'm not that super business savvy, but you know what? The fact is that I'm doing something about it. I'm reading books. I'm going to seminars. I'm attending networking events. I'm talking to people. I'm taking actionable steps to become better at understanding the game of business. And, you know, the best way to help combat this would be to simply, you don't have to feel like you need to be smart or like expert in everything, but you should be able to get down the basics. You should be able to understand the basics. Being good at what you do just isn't enough. You need to understand how to sell. You need to understand marketing. You need to understand how to properly price your services. Uh, these are just essential pieces and of the foundation of business knowledge. So, again, like I said, you don't need to learn, all the advanced stuff. Just learn the basics of it. You should have to understand the basics before trying to explore any business venture. So that would be number 3 of the core killers: lack of business knowledge. So now we're going to go into segment 2, which is people problems. So people problems. Number 4 would be having a weak team or solo burnout, right? Now, having a weak team means that you don't have the right systems in place. You don't have the proper people who can help move your business forward. And as a solopreneur, you also, you know, you eventually at some point you're going to have to hire somebody to help elevate your business. Now you can do things for yourself for quite some time, but eventually if you're trying to, reach like a 7, 8 figure number, you're going to need to start putting a system in place. You're going to need to stop wearing all the caps and start delegating some tasks. So as a solopreneur, you're gonna have to hire that VA, or you're gonna have to get an accountant, or you're gonna have to get oh, excuse me. You're gonna have to get a business coach, right? Um, trying to be the CEO, the admin, the customer service all at once, you're bound to burn out. So the solution for this one here would be, if you have a team, try to make sure you're building a strong team. Make sure you're building and putting the right people in the places that will help elevate your business. And again, if you're a solopreneur, just again, take things as far as you can manage and then delegate. Don't try to do everything yourself for too long. Once you get to a point where it's just like you're making so much money, you have to focus. You're gonna have to shift your focus to just that, and you're gonna have to put other tasks off. So, yeah, just make sure that you're not burning yourself out, or making sure that you just got the right pieces for your team. All right. So this one next, number 5 would be no clear vision or strategy. I would say above all else, what I've learned over the last like 5 years, and shout out to David Shands and Donnie Wiggins of the Social Proof podcast. This is one thing that, I've constantly learned from them. I'm listening to their podcast, and every time they do like a top 10 list, it's always clarity. It's always about having a clear vision. You have to literally understand and be clear of what you want and how you're going to do it. You have to be clear because without clarity, your business is going to drift because you're not on a straight road. And so, waking up and trying to wing it every morning, it's not going to work. You got to have a plan. What is the goal for today? What is the goal for next week? What is the goal for this quarter? What is the main goal for this year? Who is your ideal customer? What unique offer are you putting out to the people? Just becoming clear is probably almost like top two things that you need to make sure you're doing is be clear on what it is you want to do and how you're going to get there. So I would say, I mean, there's not really much of a solution I could say there. It's just, but simply is just be clear of what you want to do. So next would be failure to pivot. And by pivot, I don't mean quitting, right? Which we'll get to at some point. We'll get to that point. But pivoting just simply just means, you're doing something long time, you've exhausted all your options and it's just not working. So you pivot. Now, I can definitely say I've been a little bit of a culprit of this. Sometimes I might think it's just me quitting versus pivoting. And so, I I've done quite a few things since I've been in this entrepreneur's game. I've been here. I am doing podcasting. I did day trading and network marketing. That was something I pivoted from because it was something that I just wasn't really happy with doing anymore. Like that's why I got out of it. I didn't quit it. I pivoted from it because it just wasn't something I was happy doing. So I moved on from it. So when something isn't working, you just want to make sure that you've exhausted all your options before, you're like pivot. And so, you know, listen to the data, follow feedback, and just try to stay as flexible as possible. Because that's what pivoting is. You're not quitting. You're just understanding that, maybe this just isn't for you. Sometimes that's what it comes to. You're just like, man, okay, I've been doing this and I'm just not seeing the results. But sometimes it just be, sometimes you just gotta have the mindset to keep pushing through no matter how tough it's gonna get. Whether it takes 6 months, whether it takes a year, 5 years, 10 years, you just keep putting in the work. But also, don't stress yourself out about it. If you strongly feel like you just need to pivot from what you're doing to something else, make you feel happy, by all means do that. So that is segment two, the people problems. So just to quickly recap, we went over the core killers, segment one, which is the lack of market need. Two, running out of money. And then three, lack of business knowledge. Then we went over people problems, which is either having a weak team or solo hustle burnout, no clarity, and then failure to pivot. Now, the last section is segment three, and this focuses on money, marketing, and mindset, right? So, the first point, number 7 here, we're going to get into is poor marketing, right? If nobody can see your product, nobody knows you have anything to sell, right? People have to know and see your product. They have to know that you built something amazing. If you don't market it, it's not going to go anywhere. You need visibility. That's why it's essential to have like social media page nowadays. That's why it's necessary to have a website. You need this stuff. You need to have the visibility, and don't feel like you have to. I mean, you should probably put it on all platforms because like I think like the all more platforms you're on, that's more visibility, more exposure you get. So if put things out on TikTok, put things out on Instagram, put things out on Snapchat, Facebook, YouTube, Threads, Fanbase, Twitter, X, put things out on all these platforms. Um, and because that's going to create the visibility. Now, typically, you could just focus on one platform and then just make sure you're showing up consistently and making sure you're constantly promoting it. Like, with my bookkeeping business, like I do Instagram where I'll just put like the short post. I'll give you like a bookkeeping tip or something like that, or I'll post like the shorts to like the podcast. But then I also do YouTube as well for the long form people, who just like to consume content that way, like the long form content. So, and then also too, I'm also branding myself. I wear my stamp, my MG Millennial Gem stamp. That's a form of branding, marketing myself, marketing my business. So, especially if you have a clothing brand, definitely you should be wearing your own stuff and marketing, branding your own stuff and your own stuff. So that's number 7. Number 8, this is the fear of selling. Now, I can admit, I have a hard time, you know, pushing sales onto people. We try to hide behind, the content instead of like closing, you know. If you but I've what I've come to learn is if you believe in your product, then you should be able to sell it. If you know you have a strong product, you shouldn't have fear in selling it. The way you're looking at it, if you were clear about what it is you want to do, you're solving a problem. You're helping someone. I'm still learning to this day. I can't be afraid to sell to anyone. I got to keep putting it out there. Whether I get a bunch of no's, fact is I got to keep asking. 'Cause somebody's gonna give me that yes. Somebody's gonna eventually give me that thumbs up, and they'll pay me for my services. But it won't happen if I'm too afraid to sell, and it won't happen for you if you're too afraid to sell. So you definitely got to get yourself out there and go a little bit more on offense when it comes to uh you know giving out trying to have people buy into your product. I'm not saying you have to do like a hard sell, like really get up in their face, like just try to just have like a simple conversation, find something common, kind of ease your way into the conversation and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to come off so salesy because, most people don't like people who are extra salesy. I know I don't, and I don't want to ever come off like that. So, number 9 is ignoring customer feedback. Now, obviously, you're putting a product out for your customers, right? So, your customers are going to tell you whether or not your product is good or your product sucks. So, you need to listen to your customers, look at the testimonials, look at the reviews. Um, like you got to pay attention to the stuff. If you're the DMs, the questions, these are all things that can help, you know, doing polls and stuff like that. These can all help grow your brand and, help improve your product, your messaging, and your experience. So don't ever look at feedback as criticism. You should look at it as a cheat code because this is people telling you, okay, this is what I would like to see better with your product. And then now you can go out and revamp that product to make it better. So I'll never look at feedback as criticism, and neither should you. Feedback is good. And then the last thing, I kind of touched on it earlier, quitting too soon, right? So most people quit right before they get to the breakthrough. So one quote that I got from shout out to Nehemiah Davis, Circle of Greatness. One quote I heard from Neil was, I must break down before I break through. And so a lot of us, and again, I've done this myself too. I'm also a culprit of this. Sometimes you just quit too early. We're human. Like sometimes things aren't working fast enough, and we're just like, yeah, this isn't working. Because we're not getting the traction that we want. We're not making the money that we want. So we just think that, yeah, this isn't working. So let me just throw this whole thing away. After you've already invested money and time into it, like you don't want to do that. I'm realizing like that's not gonna work no more. Like I'm putting my time in it. You gotta understand there's gonna be slow months. You put the time in up front, you gotta grind it out. There's gonna be a lot of slow months. Entrepreneurship is a very, very, very hard thing to master. And it's a truly a mental game because there's gonna be a lot of slow months. There's gonna be a lot of doubt. There's gonna be a lot of questioning of whether or not are you built for this life? Because I still ask myself that question to this day. And I've been exploring entrepreneurship since 2020. It is still that challenging. I go through it every day, but you know what? I realize that there's a certain goal that I want. There's a certain end game that I'm trying to reach. And I won't get there if, I keep quitting and I keep, pushing things off to the side and not committing long term and kind of just pushing through the tough times and staying consistent. So, I have to realize like, I agree that, I am solving a problem, right? So I just need to stay consistent and the results will come. As simple as that. Stay consistent. Consistency is literally the difference between you getting there and you just missing, the breakthrough. That's something that David Shands also kind of constantly preaches is consistent. You have to be consistent. And I'm learning that myself. So definitely stay consistent. So don't quit the grind, just adjust your strategy. All right, y'all. So just a quick recap of all 10 things we talked about. You need to make sure you have a market need. No market need, it's not gonna work out. Running out of cash, lack of business knowledge, having a weak team, solo burnout, having no strategy, no clarity, refusing to pivot, poor marketing, fear of selling, ignoring feedback, and quitting too early. Now, what I want y'all to do is to simply ask yourself, where are you stuck right now? Because I'm sure out of the 10 of these, you're probably stuck on maybe all 10 of these, but maybe not. Maybe there's just one or two of them that you're stuck on. So definitely just ask yourself and let me know in the comments and let me also know in the show notes, like in the reviews, like which one you're stuck on. Or feel free to DM me and what questions or in your comments about like, which one's the hardest? Which one do you feel hit the hardest for you? Um, you know, my challenge would be simply just to pick one of these areas for this week and just take action. It's all about action, 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 action. Take action on everything. Like there's no more sitting on the sidelines. There's no more playing defense. Like entrepreneurship, you put yourself in the game. Nobody's controlling you or doing anything like that. You're the coach. You're the player coach. So, you dictate what you want to do. How many points do you want to score? So, just before we close out, I like to say, if you found value in this episode, definitely share with another entrepreneur. Definitely hit that like, subscribe button. Also follow the podcast on IG. Follow me on IG. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Don't forget to, wherever you're tuning in from, make sure you just tap into the podcast. And again, just share it with anybody frequently. Share with anybody who's an entrepreneur. And also, if you are in need of a bookkeeper, again, I am a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor. So if you're a business owner who needs a bookkeeper or know somebody who needs a bookkeeper, make sure you schedule a consultation with the link that'll be left in the show notes and in the description. All right. I'll catch y'all in the next episode. Peace.